Hey everyone, it's Danica and welcome to Something Like a Star. Today I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up and my June TBR. It's a little bit of a different setting today because my brother graduated high school this weekend, so I am at my parents' house. But that's good because that's where all of my books are anyway. They actually just live 10 minutes down the road from where I currently live, so it's not that big of a deal. You may see a lot more videos in this setting in the future because I like the lighting here pretty well as well. I'm right in front of a window, whereas at home I'm like this far away from a window. So this May I read How to Be a Heroine. I did a full review video on this, so I won't go into too much about what it's about, but it's a part memoir, part literary analysis, and it follows the author through her life based on the heroine she was reading at the time. I loved this book. I actually started in April, but I read only the first 20 pages, so I read the bulk of it in May. Next, I read Things Not Seen. It's by Andrew Clements, and I love this cover because you can only see the white bits here when it's not straight onto light. That's a better view of it. This was a really fun, easy read. It's been sitting on my bookshelf for quite some time, and I just haven't picked it up because it felt too easy for the mood I was in. But after I traveled all the way to get here, I was really in the mood for something easy. It's only 250 pages or so, and it's got almost no words per page. I think I read it in just a handful of hours. I really enjoyed it. The premise is that our main character wakes up on this Tuesday in February and is invisible for no apparent reason. They can't quite figure it out, and how he deals with being invisible. Next, I read Sphinx by T.S. Lerner, and it's set in the 1970s in Alexandria, Egypt. It follows Oliver, the husband of archaeologist Isabella, who at the beginning of the novel, very, very beginning, is tragically drowned in either an accident or a preconceived fate and destiny. It sort of plays with fate and destiny, the whole thing. And I love mythology, and I love history, and I love archaeology, so this was a really fun read. There were moments where I felt a little weird about it because I tend to feel weird about reading male heroes whose whole character arc is driven by female death. I find that a little icky, but this dealt with it pretty well. So, worth a read. Had a good time. It is a longer book, so this is one for a good trip. Next, I read Audie Murphy, War Hero and Movie Star, and I also read Miriam Ma Ferguson. These are by two different authors, but they're in the same series. I read them for work. I was trying to do some research for an exhibit I'm building at the museum, and I found these really genuinely terrible. I think that it's the Stars of Texas series. They sell them in the shop where I work, but I would not recommend them if you're looking for a history book. I thought that they were written for adults because the way they're placed in the store is to be written for adults. But as you can see, there's essentially no information on the pages, and it was very propagandist. Is that a word, propagandist? It only told one story, and it told it in a very simplified way, which when you're doing history, you really shouldn't do. Kind of rule one of history is you argue a point, but you never make it too simple because nothing is ever that simple. So I, A, did not glean any useful information out of these books, and B, would not recommend reading them to anyone because they really just were not the best accounts of these two people's lives. Both of these people are very cool. Miriam Ma Ferguson is the first woman governor of Texas in the 1800s, and Audie Murphy was from Texas, small town boy who went off to the war, came back, and became well known for being very well decorated. I believe he was the most decorated war veteran in World War One. So interesting lives, just maybe choose a different book. Next, I am currently still reading, but I'm about there. So I'm over halfway done with Nocturnes by John Connolly. I've actually read this book before. I got it in Ireland a few years ago for a Gothic Lit class I was taking, and it was really cool because John Connolly came and spoke to our class, and he signed my book. He signed it Pleasant Dreams. So I love this copy of the book. I think the cover is really pretty too. I have a fondness for book covers that are just black on a single color, and I think that minimalism is really pretty. So I'm enjoying it so far. It's been a while since I read it, and so I'd forgotten a lot of what happens. Essentially, it's a series of short stories that they're gothic horror kind of short stories, but because he's an Irish author, they're a lot more suspense filled. There is one that's set in the United States at least, or there's two that are set in the United States, the two longest ones. It opens with something called the Cancer Cowboy. A gentleman wakes up essentially naked in the New Mexico desert, doesn't know anything about himself except he's got this disease monster thing, and it follows his travels throughout the United States. And then the one I'm currently reading, which is a Charlie Parker novella, Charlie Parker being John Connolly's big go-to hero and what he tends to write his series about. So there's a novella in this, and it's set in Maine, because that is where Charlie Parker is from. I've just started that. I'm only about 10 pages in. It's quite creepy. Maine is kind of a creepy place, so I'll let you guys know what I think, and I might do a full video on this one when I am complete. Or maybe I'll do a gothic lit video. Let me know if you're interested. This is another transition book. I started this one in May. For my job, I am conducting a few oral histories with local elderly folks who remember the Great Depression. And so this book is helping me out. I'm really not that far into it. I'm only like this far in, so it's only, what, 84 pages in? So I've got quite a lot of it left to read. I don't know if I'll actually finish it because there's parts of this that don't apply to me, but I am reading it. I don't want to count it out because I've been dedicating a lot of time to this one. So on to my June TBR. June is going to be a really busy month for me at work. I only have 8 weeks with my project team to completely develop and build and print and design this exhibit that we're doing, and so I'm not going to have a lot of extra time to read. So keep that in mind. I picked my books with busyness in mind. First up is Things Hoped For by Andrew Clements. It is the sequel, kind of, to Things Not Seen. It follows a different protagonist. It follows a young girl named Gwen, but the protagonist of the previous novel intersects with her life, so I believe it takes place a number of years down the road. Another really easy, short book to read, so hopefully I can get through this one without too much of a problem. Next is The Quickening. It's by Lee DeAngelis. This is one that I picked up in the library book sale a couple years ago now, and it just looks really interesting. It seems like it's sort of a fantasy meets paganism sort of novel. The author is an initiated priestess, and so it's written with that in mind. Essentially, the plot is that it deals with a modern-day inquisition against the Fae and the shapeshifters and the shadow hunters and all of the sort of mythological beings in this novel. So I'm looking forward to it. It's another not super long book. It seems like the margins are pretty large, and so again, it shouldn't be too hard to read, and I'm hoping that the plot will suck me in on this one too. Next we have The Killing Club. It's by Marcy Walsh with Michael Malone. It has this little blurb on the front that says it's from One Life to Live, and I don't watch that show, so I don't know if the book was written by one of the characters in that show, theoretically, or if it was written previously and separately and it was notated in the show. I'm not quite sure. I get the vibe that it's one of those books that a character in the show wrote. I don't really care. It looks really good. It follows the story of 12 high schoolers who create sort of a burn book a la Mean Girls. They put people in it that they really don't like, and they come up with creative ways to kill them. Off pastime, don't think anything's going to come of it. A number of years later, one of our girls has grown up and become a detective. Both the planned murders that they wrote down in the book and the people in the club start actually dying, so it follows the story. I think this will be a really fun poolside kind of read whenever I've got spare time. It's a little bit thicker, has a little bit more words per page, but it's just a trade paperback, so it shouldn't be too bad. And finally, if I have time, I would love to read Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5. I am awful. I've only read one Kurt Vonnegut book. It's actually none of his really popular ones. One of my neighbors loaned it to me a few years ago, and I didn't appreciate it as much in that time as I think I would appreciate it now. I think I need to reread that one. But this is another chance to give him a shot. I've heard great things about this book. One of my all-time favorite quotes is from this book, even though I've never read it. And so I'm just really looking forward to this one. I'm going to try and read it this summer, even if I don't get to it in June. So wish me luck. Today's song of the day is Freedom by Wynonna Judd, and I'll see you all next week.